when you like look back in hindsight, you're just like, I could really see God in all these moments.
Welcome to Dusty Sandals, where each week we chat with one person who's walked with Jesus and has a story to tell. This week we're chatting with Hubert Nguyen. Welcome, Hubert.
Hello.
Good to see you, mate. How you doing?
Yes, I'm good. I'm good.
So,
you know, life is very fun right now.
Yeah, mate. You were telling me before we started today that you've just bought a house.
Yeah.
You've got a fiance lined up. You know, life's humming along for you, mate.
Yeah, I've got a few. No,
A few fiancés? Or?
yeah, of course. I think the Bible talks about no,
good to see you, mate. We've brought you on because you're a person who has a story to tell about God. You've walked with him a little bit. Let's get right into it. Where did your story with Jesus really begin, if you think back?
Like there are a few different milestones. I'd say in primary school, I went to a Catholic primary school.
Oh, yeah.
And with Catholicism, they obviously have a really similar belief system, if not quite like the same in a way. But pretty much like learning the Bible and, you know, learning about God, it all stemmed from that. And that was like the start of my faith journey. And I grew up in a Buddhist household. So like outside of that, I didn't really have any experience with God. So primary school kind of set me up in terms of just general biblical foundation, like pretty superficial, but I learnt about like Noah and like even Jonah and the whale and things like that.
Okay, yeah, all the Bible stories.
Yeah, broadly that's where it started, and then it blossomed in high school, I would say.
Okay.
At the end of year 7. And I was brought into church by my sister, who she was on her own faith journey as well.
Did she go to the Catholic school as well?
Yeah, so we all went to the same school, but like obviously that was never a faith that we associated ourselves with.
Yeah.
Could be because of opportunity, whether it's to do with my family not believing in that.
Yeah. Were they like a staunch sort of like straight down the line Buddhist, like you better not become a Christian here, or was it kind of more casual?
No, it was definitely more casual.
Okay.
And I think like religion's quite ritualistic when it came to my family.
Yep.
It was just like we go to the temple and we just do things on specific dates.
It's not like a deep lifestyle thing.
No.
Or yeah.
Like we would have an altar in our household.
Okay.
And like we'd burn incense to like honor our ancestors. And
do you like the smell of incense?
Oh no. Yeah. And
Okay.
yeah, I think they call it like joss sticks, and like you'd like put them in like this ash filled like container.
Yeah.
So it like it doesn't bring good memories, but it was just this thing that we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your sister becomes a Christian and then invites you to church, was it?
Yeah. So like she was studying to be a doctor. And, with our family circumstances, which I might get into later, she really needed something to change in her life.
Yeah.
Even though she was successful in her studies, she was quite empty inside.
Okay.
So she, her friend invited her to church. And once she found God and, went to church regularly, she wanted the same for us. When I say us, I mean my older brother, myself, and my younger brother.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
so family of 4 kids.
Yeah.
Mum and a dad. Your mum and dad still together?
No. So during that time, they were already separated.
Okay.
So it was around when I was like maybe 7 or 8 years old. I honestly don't really remember.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. How did that happen with your mum and your dad separating?
It was quite a hard time because I think like when I reflect upon my childhood, I probably didn't know very much. And I think talking to my siblings as an adult, I kind of gained more insight on the situation around it. I think my dad, he wasn't the most family-centric person.
Yep.
Like, he didn't abuse us or anything, but I think he just didn't have his priorities straight.
Was he kind of like my job is to work and earn the money, and that's my fatherhood sort of done? Or?
Honestly, I couldn't speak into that. It could be,
Okay.
but I think, he prioritized joy and fun in his life. So he would go out drinking late at night, and we didn't really have a dad at home.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I talked to my sister and my brother recently, and they were just saying, yeah, like we'll drive late at night to go pick him up. Like, and, like my mum would look for him in like the generic spots that he would be in.
Yeah.
And like we'll drive around at night trying to find him.
Right.
And I have no recollection of this. So it must have been when I was like 1 or 2 years old.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But it was quite dysfunctional already. So like mum with 4 children. Yeah. So then I suppose that escalated. And like my dad was still not around. My mum, like she became more involved in Buddhism as I suppose an outlet for herself. Mm-hmm. And as a result, she actually began to develop schizophrenia. It's hard to say that Buddhism led to that and is attributed to that, but it was definitely a factor to it because she was heavily involved spiritually with them, and I think that could have, created trauma or something to happen where maybe spiritually something came over her. And did something to her. But also, both my parents are refugees from Vietnam.
Right, okay.
And
when did they come across?
I think in late 70s, I reckon.
All right. Yep.
So my mum would have been late teens. So she was born in 1960 and my dad was probably early 20s.
Do they still have like the strong Viet accent when you talk to them?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
My mum is a bit better spoken. She's like, she went to university here.
Right. Yep.
So she's a graduate. My dad, not so much, but he works with like he has a very thick Vietnamese accent. But yeah, like,
can you do a Vietnamese accent yourself? Like, do you have an impression that you could give us, or are we gonna skip that little bit?
I can, but there's always like the generic like a somebody, like
a somebody.
Like, I don't know.
I've seen that guy on YouTube.
Yeah.
I think I know the guy you're talking about. So good.
Yeah, but like I would have done it when I was younger, but yeah.
Okay. We won't embarrass you too much.
Appreciate it.
So you've got that dysfunctional family background, as many people do.
Yeah.
It's a common story. Mum and dad don't get along. They've got some issues. It sounds like your sister finds God and finds a lot of healing from that. What was your journey out of that and into completeness, into God? What does that sort of look like?
Yeah. So like my parents divorced, and like my journey wasn't perfect either, leading me here. But yeah, when I was 13-ish, like end of year 7, that's when my sister brought us to church, and I think I made a decision that year to follow Jesus.
Wow.
And my brothers did at the same time with the youth group I'm currently at now.
So where is this in? This is in Melbourne.
Yep. Box Hill.
Box Hill? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Asian hub.
Asian Central.
Yeah.
I love Box Hill.
Yeah.
I go to a restaurant there called Veggie Bowl, I think is the name.
Oh, right.
It's vegetarian fake meat, and they do it real good. Like, I don't know, Asians are just good with that sort of stuff.
Innovative.
Yeah.
And my grandma, she like serves us that sometimes, like Asian fake meat.
Yep.
But yeah, like church, got saved in youth group, and then pretty much since then I've just been going to church. Then started to get involved in church, serving like in the kids ministry, like kind of being a teacher there as well. Mm-hmm. And this is when I was like 14, 15 years old already.
Wow.
So like
they start you young at that church.
In I think the great thing is they give opportunities to serve.
Yeah. And
I think it's just on you whether you want to be the person to take up the opportunity or not,
That's amazing to think of, like a 14-year-old Hubert, teaching a whole bunch of kids. There's a bunch of little disciples around him, and he's like the the mentor for them at a young age.
Yeah.
I actually believe strongly in that sort of, start 'em young model of
Yeah.
ministry and discipleship.
Well, you think even about the disciples, like, Jesus wasn't like, go to Bible college for a few years and then you can be my disciple.
Yep.
But I think it's like, like just get thrown into it. Because I remember in primary school, one of my teachers was like one of the most profound ways to learn is by teaching. So I could say that's pretty true in my life, where I've been given opportunities to teach and I've actually grown a lot from that.
Yeah. And that's, am I right in saying that might have been a little bit of a catalyst to your current career? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, currently teaching year 5. I would say that it could be. Like, I think like getting leadership opportunities and service is like really like empowering in that way.
Yeah.
And I've always felt like, I could always impart wisdom upon people. But I remember very distinctly in primary school thinking about, like what I wanted to do. And I remember just saying to myself, like if I could just change one life, if I could impact someone's life, my life would already be worth living. So,
nice.
And I attributed being able to support people and help change lives through teaching.
Yeah.
And that's something I've kind of carried till now. Yeah.
I reckon it's a great career for anyone to go through, because you literally have a captive audience of sponges. They're just dry and they're ready to absorb whatever you throw their way. And you can throw good things or bad things or something in between. Hopefully you're throwing good things. I think you are.
Hopefully.
So at that young age, did you have a sense of your purpose? When you're first coming into Christianity at say 13 or whatever, did you have an understanding of what God wanted you to do with your life at that point?
Oh, like definitely not.
Yeah.
I think God's plan for your life, it's there, but how you interpret that and how you discover that, it's actually quite a long journey.
Yep.
And I think through all of that, I think I've got a better idea now. And I think I feel kind of in a way like privileged to be able to tap into that and see that for myself and see how that's unfolded thus far.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty excited for the future and like where God would lead me. But yeah, like purpose and plan, I think that's brought me through the toughest of times to be where I am now.
Yeah.
And hopefully lead me to where God ultimately wants me to be.
Mm-hmm. What are some of those tough times that you're sort of thinking about as you're talking right there?
Yeah, so I think my mum, she developed schizophrenia, and I think as a child you don't really understand the difficulties of that, whether it's for yourself or for the person with it. And like I'm just a kid who's living a life that like it seemed unfair to me, but it's not really like I knew any better. Or like like you just look at your friends and they have mum and dad at home, and like your mum's not sick, like their mum's not sick.
Yeah.
So I think like naturally I was put in a tougher position than most.
Yep.
Maybe in the Western world, I'd say. Like I'd say in the like Asia, and there are a lot of like tough places, worse than I could ever imagine, I reckon. But yeah, like in Western society, I reckon my position was quite hard. And like coming from quite a like broken background, like I had like anger issues, like I remember yelling like with like at my mom or my brothers, like because my older brother's 3 years older than me,
right?
Like he would just like physically dominate me, like naturally, right?
Hands down.
To get an advantage, I remember just like he would chase me, I'd run to the kitchen, grab a knife.
Well, are we talking like a butter knife or
like a knife, like
no way?
But
wow,
never with the intention to hurt him, but more of an intention to distance him from me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
I think like naturally we both are like we were kind of like we wanted to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But in like these circumstances, how possible is it to do the right thing all the time?
Yep.
Yeah. So like to defend myself, I'll just get a knife out. He would back off. I would have some space.
Okay.
We'd both calm down. Put the knife away. You know.
Was there ever a moment where you actually thought that you would stab him if he came toward you?
No.
Too close?
I definitely wouldn't have.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, like I would definitely punch him as hard as I can.
Yeah.
My punches weren't very good.
I was going to say, it doesn't sound like you would have done much to him.
Nah. And like we'd play fight and stuff, and you know, it's just like, he wants to do something, I want to do the exact same thing. We both can't do it.
Yep.
So there's an argument.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, my little brother would be in sorts of like those sorts of engagements as well. But yeah, broadly, like life was pretty tough. So I think dealing with a broken family, my mum's schizophrenia, it was like just so much to deal with as a child.
Yeah.
And ultimately, as a result for me, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety when I was like 15, 16 years old.
No. Yep.
I didn't really understand, like I remember being sad and stuff, but I didn't really understand like exactly what that implies and the implications of those.
And did it feel normal to you? Like you didn't know any different, so you felt like you were just like anyone else, or did
like,
you have
not
a sense that you were
necessarily.
different?
Like the biggest anxiety would be school for me.
Okay.
So I would struggle a lot to like just overcome it and just go to school.
Right.
And like with anxiety, like you kind of perpetuate sorts of like thoughts in your own mind, like what are other people thinking about you? Like, Hubert hasn't been to school in like a day. Oh, like I bet and then you just like that just snowballs.
Yeah.
So it's like, he hasn't been for a week, and then I start making up conversations of what they would be saying about me, when honestly no one's probably talking about me at all. It's like, my good mate Hubert's not there, and that's probably the extent of it. You know.
Okay.
And like I had a pretty good friendship group there. Like they would come visit me and tell me, like they come. And I remember like really enjoying school, but for some reason like it just became such a big barrier, and my main coping mechanism was gaming. So like I'd be addicted to games and just
typical teenage boy.
You literally like ignore your current life and like express it in a different manner, you know? Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So you go through that, and I look at you now. How old are you now? 25?
Yeah, 25.
You don't strike me as someone who is still in the depths of depression and anxiety. Am I right? Is that the same on the inside?
Yeah.
The outside? Okay.
Yeah.
So what's changed between now and then? How have you come out of that?
Well, I think I always held on to purpose as a big reason to do things.
Right.
And I was always kind of disappointed that like during those times I couldn't overcome school. But I never gave up. I think that was a really big part. Like even though I was anxious and sad, I never let that define who I was as a person, whether now or in 10 years, you know.
Okay.
Like
you mean in terms of like your marks at school, your performance, or
like my performance was never bad.
Yeah.
It was like average, you know. Like I remember in year 10 my teacher was like, you did better than half the class but you weren't at school. So like in the exam he's like,
nice.
Like, you know, like you did a good job, you just need to be here, so then you would actually like do a lot better. And so I never felt like I was less than or like I couldn't do it.
Yep.
It was more like with all these obstacles I just had to just pull myself out of that to really overcome it.
Yep.
And I think like luckily I wasn't completely isolated. I had friends from church who would like, you know, and like mentors in church who would always check up on me and support me. And I think that was really important. And
you keep coming back to the church part. Like, was that kind of like a pivoting point for you where you look at before and after and you go, that was the moment it sort of started to change? Or was it sort of church plus, you know, what was the mix of things that contributed to that change?
Yeah, so I think church is like, it's set really solid foundation in my life. Like gave me hope for the future.
Yeah.
And I think like, you know, when you experience God and you are touched by him, like that's just something that you can't really leave in a way. Or, and some people do, but I felt like so compelled to like give my life to God.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like my drive. And I think then I found purpose in that, as well as, you know, like I felt God still wanted me to be a teacher.
Yeah.
So I remember just persevering through. And like after school, I went to Bible college. I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
What is a Bible college? Tell us.
Bible college is where you just learn about the Bible, like theology,
Okay.
and like whether, you know, you learn about like how to study the Old Testament, how to study the New Testament, and like different features and like pastoring people and things like that. Okay. Like this was like a long time ago. So did
you go somewhere and do this Bible college? Where was that?
It was in Dandenong.
Okay. That's in Melbourne.
Yeah. The Bible college was called Harvest Bible College.
Right.
But it changed to Alpha Crucis now.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did that for a year, and then I still wanted to like go to uni. So I like tried to like go in through another way, but I still wanted to be a teacher. So I did like a diploma in sport development. After the diploma, I miraculously got offered a position in Deakin University to study teaching.
Nice.
Yeah, and I've always wanted to be primary school specific, so it was really good. Like they gave me that opportunity. And then 4 years later, yeah, like last year, I managed to get, you know, a job.
Yep.
So then I've been teaching since then.
Nice.
Yeah.
Really cool.
So then I think, in a way, what kind of really helped me was like finding a kind of purpose and a goal to hit.
Yep.
And I think like not letting my circumstances and like the difficulties I was in to define my future.
Yeah. You mentioned before that you had a sense that God was calling you to something, to teaching or, you know, to sharing with people and growing them. What is that actually like? You know, this sense that God is there and he's got this purpose. What does it feel like? What does it look like? How does it actually happen?
Well, what it feels like to me is like, despite the circumstances around you, like nothing can stand in the way of God and what he wants to happen. Like
it's a confidence thing. Like you're confident that God is going to overcome.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's like ultimately, if I'm obedient to God, like not like perfect, because I think we're all flawed and sinners, right? But I think when we just have total faith in God that, you know, like if he's sovereign and like, you know, all powerful, all knowing, like what he wants will happen.
Yeah.
And if I steward the things that he's given me and kind of trust that, I'm sure like God's plan will just carry through, you know? And like, I didn't know that God was going to, like, he wanted me to be a teacher, but that was a passion that I had. And I think God, like, it might have been, like, could be a complete coincidence, you know, but I think like God uses you in whatever you are willing to give.
Yeah.
So
he sort of finds those things in you that are good, that are strong, and he goes, "Yep, I'm going to use that and put it to use over here." And yeah, I see that a lot in my life as well. Have you ever heard God's voice?
Not an audible voice.
Yeah.
Not audibly, like not like a Hubert. This is God. But more of like a very strong feeling, like it's like beyond my normal thought.
Okay, so not the sort of strong feeling like, man, I really want a burger right now.
Yeah, I have a lot of those strong feelings as well.
So do I.
But it's more, it's just like a really like for me, I kind of view it as this isn't what I normally think of. This isn't, maybe I wouldn't agree with this like then and there.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think I've told you this before, where like my fiance now, I was led, or like God told me, not audibly, but that I was going to marry her.
Yep.
And this was
What's her name?
Isabel.
Hmm.
Yeah. So this is 3 years before I started dating her.
Yep.
Yeah, and during that time, I wouldn't say hate. Hate is a strong word. I disliked her highly. I highly disliked her.
Was it like her face or her hair, or did she have pimples? Or?
No. It was more to do with the personality. Like, we had a huge clash in personality.
Man, I hope she's not listening to this right now.
She knows.
Let's
all about
not
it.
send her the link.
Nah, she knows all about it, and
Yeah.
like, you know, we were at each other's throats in a way.
Right.
You know, like, she, like,
What did she think of you at the same time? Did she also not?
as in, she was like more frustrated that I was frustrated at her.
She was more frustrated that you were frustrated. So she didn't like the fact that you didn't like her.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So there was nothing about me necessarily that was wrong to her,
Okay.
but it was like that I had an issue with her.
Yeah.
That's why she
What
had an
was
issue with me.
it? Can you list a few things for us? Like, what did this?
Well, to give you
Why
some
would you
context,
not like her?
so to give you some context, like, if you guys have done the Myers-Briggs personality test,
Yep, I have.
like, I'm like an extrovert, I'm sensing, I'm a thinker and a judger.
Okay.
She's the exact opposite.
In
So,
every
like,
four.
yeah.
In every one of those four.
Yeah.
Yep.
The complete opposite. So naturally, our brains go to opposite places when
Yeah.
we approach things.
So it's not like that she's objectively this like dislikable person.
No.
It's just she's different from you, and
Yeah.
and the friction was there.
Yeah, and like, my strengths would be her weaknesses.
Okay.
And her strengths would also be my strengths, but no, I'm joking. No.
That's one thing that we've talked about before and laughed about, is the fact that if there's one thing that comes across through this part of your story, it could be that God has this massive issue with pride that he needs to deal with you.
Yeah.
'Cause-
No, I definitely understand that. Yeah.
No, I actually do think that you're a humble person, but it comes across wrong at this point in the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. No,
Continue, don't let me interrupt you.
yeah. I definitely like we've had many conversations about pride, but yeah, that so before the 3 years of when, like, so God told me, and 3 years after we started dating, before that, you know, there was a lot of friction, and then God told me, and for me to have that thought of on my own was impossible for me. Like, I wouldn't have thought that I would want to nor marry, like, ever marry her.
Yep.
Right? So it was already an impossible thing in my mind.
Mhm.
Then God told me. And then for the next 3 years, I was trying to push that away. Like, run the opposite way, ship her with one of my friends. You know, like,
you tried that, didn't you?
Yeah,
You had a mate that you
yeah.
kinda,
So one of my best mates.
yeah.
I was trying to, you know, like, maybe
Yeah.
yeah, you guys would be cool together.
It didn't work.
Yeah, but I realized the more I did that, the less I saw her the way God wanted me to see her. And I realized that was the reality. It was like my preconceptions of her and the way I thought about her was actually so ungodly. You know, like to think that one of his creations is like so annoying
Yeah.
is like very it's not loving at all.
So,
you know?
so it sounds like it's the story is shifting from there's issues with this girl, and all the problems are on her end, to you're realizing actually maybe this is a heart issue with me that I need to deal with.
Yeah. And, you know, I try to justify my position like all the time, like God probably didn't tell me to do this. He probably just said it just to like make me treat her nicer.
Okay.
You know, and like I try to deny everything, but yeah, like ultimately when push came to shove, like I had to kind of look at myself. You know, like the whole story about like don't judge the speck in someone's eye when you have a log in yours.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and that's ultimately what happened. Like I realized actually she is a pretty cool person. Like a lot of like, you know, just because I don't agree with everything she does, or like it's not like she did anything wrong. It's just like her thought process was different to mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, actually, I actually see a really cool person.
Yeah.
On the other end, but I just needed to get rid of everything I thought I wanted in a partner, firstly, and kind of submit myself and humble myself to see her in a way that God saw her.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
What's it been like, since then? You guys have been together for how many years now?
It's been about 2.5 now.
2.5. What's it been like in that last couple and a half years, in terms of like your growth and what you've learnt about God, life, relationships, yourself? Has that been a big growth curve for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think ultimately, like, if it was just one point that I could just emphasize, it's just like, I couldn't have imagined the good that could have come out of it.
Right.
I think like with dating, a lot of the times, like we're just like, like we make our own checklists about
Yep.
what is ideal in our partner.
Uh-huh.
But I realized everything that I thought would have been ideal would have actually ultimately like died sooner or later. Like, thinks I'm funny. Or,
yeah.
Like super hot. Yeah. Or like super talented at this and this and this,
You wanted like a circus monkey.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Something that's
like a dog. Someone just to do exactly what I tell them to do.
Yeah.
Do tricks. No. But I'm not that kind of guy. Please. Please. But yeah, like I think I ultimately like I think God's really shown me like actually things that matter, like firstly, both the directions in our life is heading in one direction now. Like we're not two separate people trying to live two separate lives together.
How would you describe like the dynamic in your relationship as it stands these days?
I think generally it's pretty united. I think we and it's not a coincidence that I think both of our directions are quite similar.
Okay.
I think it's really ordained.
Yeah.
And I think we've learnt to trust in each other's judgment of things. And I think we both have different perspectives. And it doesn't and I think what's really sad is when we automatically think ours is better than the others. But actually, different perspectives have different insight on things. And I've learnt to kind of like see her, like the things she says as a strength and see her as like, someone who is valuable rather than annoying. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a fundamental shift. And that probably says a lot about the way that God wants you to go about relationships with other people as well. I mean, that's a huge learning. And I can definitely relate to that in my life. I think I'm a little bit further back on that learning curve than you are, but God's even teaching me. I wanted to know, you've talked a bit about your relationship, and by the way, before we leave that topic, when are you looking to get married? We're in the middle of a global pandemic. I think that's affected things.
Yeah, it was supposed to be December 22nd.
2020.
Yes, this year.
Yep.
But yeah, I probably need to call the reception place and probably figure out another date.
Yeah.
But we'll see how we go, because I think ultimately, like, our relationship isn't just between us. I think like how we go about our relationship is a reflection of God, and I actually had a really personal conversation with her mum yesterday, just about because we could always just sign papers and do everything else later, like the ceremonial reception. But I think ultimately we want to like still honor her parents, honor her, honor me, and ultimately honor like God in the decisions we make. And I was just kind of like it doesn't really matter about your parents. Like is this like the longer we delay, the longer it is for us to kind of get on with our future together.
Yep.
But actually, I realized, like, I really need to honor her parents, in every decision I make. So yeah, like, I've decided, like, if they're not happy for us to sign papers and they really want to be there, and her dad's in Malaysia right now, so so that's a big reason why we would delay on that. But yeah, like, no set plan now, but I think ultimately we want to honor all parties involved.
You seem at peace with that decision.
Yeah, it was probably a month ago since I deeply thought about it.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty controversial topic between Isabel and I.
Yeah, yeah.
Because obviously I just want to get married.
Yep.
Right? Like, there's nothing stopping me. Like, there's nothing on my side, like my family, no reason for us to slow down in that regard. And then, like, it was actually Isabel who was like, I really want my dad to be there. I'm like, that's awesome that you want your dad to be there. But I don't feel like that's enough of a justification to, like, delay our marriage by, like, a year or a year and a half or however long this pandemic goes for.
Yeah.
And I, like, you know, like, I was, like, it wasn't the greatest of endings, but I think we tried to, you know, progress, and Isabel did her own thinking and I did my own thinking, and I kind of, I came away with it with, you know, like actually this is just an opportunity for me to work on, you know, some other things before we get married.
Right.
You know, like, so that when we do get married, we'll be ready and we'll be, you know, stronger, and in a way we can honor God more in that time.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and it's a unique time in your lives. Like, you'll never have this preparation period again. You know, once you're married, you know, it's a different stage. Yeah. I'm guessing that your experience of having gone from God literally telling you to marry someone that you did not think that you would ever marry.
Yeah.
And then following that voice of God, now seeing it develop into this amazing relationship that you've got. I'm guessing that gave you a lot of confidence in the fact that God is real and he's there and you can trust him.
Yeah. Like, I think ultimately everything, like, happens for a reason. Like, I'm not saying God's, like, trying to kill everybody with the coronavirus, but I think, you know, like, he's led me this far.
Yep.
And, you know, like, if God wants it to happen, it'll happen. You know, like the whole process of getting a house was, like, stressful.
Right.
Like, it was not a good experience.
Okay.
And I've, you know, like, so many other things in my life where I could say that that's, like, just as true. But in the end, like, when you, like, look back in hindsight, you're just like, I could really see God in all these moments. And you know, like, sometimes we think, like, our problems are, like, too small for God to kind of, like, be involved in.
Yeah.
But every single time I'm like, I see God's hand in that. Like, like, how could this have happened? And, like, so perfectly, even in such an imperfect situation.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, for the good of me. You know, like, I haven't had everything my way in life, you know, like, I've got, like, pretty bad eczema, you know, like, I remember, you know, like, having, like, really bad asthma when I was a kid. Like, I've been dealt with, like, the best hand in life, I felt. But, you know, I see all these moments, and like, God just uses all these things just to, like, you know, like, he cares about me. And like, we're not called to have, you know, like, perfect lives where we're in, like, mansions and, like, have a slave or someone, you know, a butler serving us hand and feet.
Yep.
But yeah, I think ultimately like, when I look back, I'm just like, I'm so grateful for everything that's happened. Like, despite my mum being sick, despite my family, you know, like, being torn apart in a way.
Yep.
Despite everything I've gone through, I'm ultimately, like, pretty grateful.
Yep.
For everything.
You ever had any doubts about God, though, in, like, especially in those challenging times? Have you ever struggled with, wait, hang on, is God actually there? Is he actually real? does he actually care about me? Or has it always been this sort of optimistic confidence that you have these days?
Yeah. It has definitely been a really long journey of doubt. Like I remember lying in bed like so many nights, just like, saying, why me? Why me? Like with all these difficulties.
Yeah.
And, like you're taught that there's this loving God and good God. And like you're going through all this pain and suffering. It's like if you're God, like you could take it away. Like you have the power to remove it.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that's true. He can, but he didn't. Whether it was like related to me being so itchy at night and like not being able to sleep and like being so exhausted that I couldn't go to school, or like my parents and my mum, or just a whole bunch of things. It just sucks. You naturally doubt. And I remember like going through long phases of like doubt in my life. But what I shared with you earlier today was, like in that questioning, in the doubt, naturally I doubt because I'm a skeptic. I like to think of things logically.
Yep.
And when there's like kind of like a gap in logic, that's where doubt will seep in, and that's not a bad thing. So I questioned. I was like, like how, and I remember I actually answered this question with a group of like year 6 and year 7 boys at my church last week. It's like, how can like why do bad things happen to good people? And and then we answered a question. Is God the one kind of like bringing that suffering to people? Yeah. Is he the cause of it?
Yeah.
And ultimately, like, these questions are like faith making or faith breaking questions.
Fundamental. Yeah. Yep.
So like, I'm that kind of person that asks like really hard questions. And I remember like asking my mentors and things at church, and actually I think what really helped me during those times was they just didn't brush it off. It's like, oh, it's a very hard question. Maybe Google it.
Oh, really?
Nah, like they didn't say that.
Okay.
But it was like they're willing to like have that conversation with me, take the time out of their day to, go through it with me.
Yeah.
And I think like that's what's really helped me during those times, to have people in my life who are willing to have a conversation with me about my faith or my lack of faith or my wavering faith.
Yep.
Yeah.
One thing that's been popping into my mind throughout, hearing your story here is the concept of God as Father.
Okay.
When I heard you say earlier that your father was kind of like, he was the sort of dude that your mum and your siblings had to go searching for around the streets or whatever. Man, that's extreme. Like there are very few people who could say that they had an experience with their father that was, I don't know, just like that. That's very unique.
Yeah.
Then you come into an experience with God, and God's primary description in the Bible is that of a loving father who is there for his kids. He seeks out his kids even when they mess up, and he's ever present. He's ever loving. He's just wanting to be with the kids, right?
Yeah.
How has that kind of gone for you? Has your experience with your father impacted your journey with God and your impression of God as a father, or is that kind of just, it's a separate thing for you and you can separate them?
I think like the idea of fatherhood, like I've always had like a pretty, like general, I'll say like a normal generic idea of what a father should be like.
Right. Yeah.
Like watching TV and stuff, you just like build this like sort of perception of what it should be. Yeah. And it was kind of difficult not having that. And I resented my dad for a long time because of that. But in terms of God as father, it was like I just kind of put him into that sort of like perception that I had, where I'm like, like what would I do if I was a father? You know, like I would want the best for my kid no matter what. You know, like I'll punish him if he needs it. You know, like but also support him in growth. Like whether it's building them up in their values or physically, emotionally, socially, just all these different things. Like, what would I do? And I think, like, ultimately, when I think about what it would be like to unconditionally love someone, like, what does that look like? That's what I view God as. I'm like, like if I wouldn't want to hurt my child, like, why would God want to do that? Why would a more loving God, like, because I'm capped with my ability to love. But if God's like infinitely love, he is love, then like if he loves me, that expression is even greater.
Yeah. And that's what Jesus always said. Like when he came to earth, Jesus' primary mission, I reckon, was to save us from our sins. But secondarily, he came to show us what God is actually like, not what other people have shown us that God is like.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I see in Jesus a lot. He was trying to correct the misperceptions that God was being given among people. You know, he talked about God being a good father. He talked about the fact that, humanly speaking, we wouldn't give our child a scorpion if they asked for an egg. And then he says, like, if a dodgy human father, relatively dodgy human father, wouldn't do that, give a scorpion instead of an egg to their son, then your Father in heaven, he like loves you way more and is actually perfect, unlike your dodgy, relatively dodgy human father.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing that Jesus just tried to drive home time after time after time, is that people are prone to thinking and associating God with their own human experiences. And I'm really glad to hear that, you managed to separate God as kind of like a different type of father than the one that you'd experienced. Because, that's so fundamental, eh? And,
Yeah. And I think naturally for me, that perception that I had of like an ideal father, that I wish I had, that kind of like helped me to, think about what it would be like for me as a father. And like, actually I'm a very like future focused guy.
Right.
And a part of me kind of pushing out of depression and anxiety was, like vision of a better future.
Yep.
And like, I've always wanted to be like a father. Like, just because of my experience was poor, it didn't mean that I didn't want that for myself. And I didn't want to like, so yeah, I've always like kind of associated like, like what, like I've always thought about what I would do as a father. Yeah. So I'm like, I think it set me up in a really good way. I think I'm really glad that I didn't come out of like the trauma that I went through with a really flawed vision or like picture of what a father should be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been cool hearing your story, because you've gone from this place where dysfunctional family, anxiety, depression, this contentious, angry attitude within your sort of sibling community there. And then God comes along and he's like, hey, mate, I'm your new father. I'm the good one. I love you. I'm here for you. And I've got a bright future for you. And, you're only 25 now. There's a lot more life to be lived. And maybe we'll have to do this interview in 10 years' time when you and your then wife, have a couple of kids running around. And I can only imagine that experience will get much deeper as you become a father yourself and a good father, hopefully, at that. I reckon you'll be a good father.
Hopefully.
Half decent, at least.
Not as good as God, though, but make do.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd want to say to people before we kind of wrap up your story? Anything that you're just dying for people to know before we finish up?
I think like what my experience kind of teaches me, and hopefully other people, is that like despite like crappy times, I think when you're tapped into such a God who loves you, and like has a plan for you, like things will get better. But we can only experience time in like one way, which is like then and there.
Yeah.
Like God is different. He can see the past, the present, the future, and because God isn't like affected by time, like God knows what's going to happen with you. And he like I believe God will intervene if things won't happen according to his plan.
Yep.
And I just trust that when we are his children, when we have chosen to be reborn for him, he just that plan will come to fruition if you like truly trust God.
Nice. Yep. Well, that's probably a good place to finish off for today. Hubert, thanks so much for being with us, and for being legit and open and vulnerable even with your story. And we wish you all the best as you step into that future with your wife and kids and all those other things.
Thanks, Trent.